Hey there, history buffs and groovy cats. BuzzList here, and guess what? We're cranking the time machine and taking a trip back to the 1960s. Yeah, baby! Get ready to twist and shout your way through a decade of peace, love, and some seriously mind-blowing events. We're talking about the moon landing, the Beatles, Woodstock, and a whole lot of shaking going on. Don't forget to smash that subscribe button and ring the bell faster than you can say groovy so you don't miss out on any of the action. And a huge thank you to all you cool cats who are already subscribed. You guys are out of sight. So grab your lava lamps, your go-go boots, and get ready to learn some totally rad facts about the grooviest decade ever. All right, let's kick things off with the biggest band to ever hit the scene, the Beatles. These four lads from Liverpool weren't just musicians, they were a full-blown phenomenon. I'm talking girls fainting, crowds screaming, and records selling faster than hotcakes at a pancake festival. Seriously, these guys were bigger than the internet. Okay, maybe not the internet, but you get the idea. Their music, man, it was like nothing anyone had ever heard before. Catchy tunes, groovy lyrics, and those haircuts. Don't even get me started on those haircuts. Let's just say they inspired a whole generation of mop tops. From Love Me Do to Let It Be, the Beatles changed the face of music forever and left a legacy that's still like totally groovy, man. Hold on to your hats, folks, because in 1969, something truly out of this world happened. Neil Armstrong took one small step onto the moon, and the world watched in awe. Can you imagine being strapped into a giant metal tube, hurtling through space at thousands of miles per hour? I get nervous just thinking about getting on a roller coaster, but these brave astronauts, they were something else. They faced the unknown with courage, determination, and probably a whole lot of antacids. And that moment when Neil Armstrong uttered those famous words, "That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind." Chills, man, pure chills. All right, everybody, buckle up. We're traveling back to 1969, to a little farm in Bethel, New York. It was supposed to be a simple music festival. You know, a few bands, some chill vibes. But then, bam! 500,000 people showed up. Can you imagine? It was like if every Starbucks in America suddenly turned into a concert venue. They called it Woodstock. And let me tell you, it was legendary. We're talking 3 days of peace, love and music. Oh, and did I mention mud? Yeah, there was a lot of mud, like a whole lot of mud. I'm talking stuck in the mud, can't see your shoes kind of mud. But you know what? Nobody seemed to mind. Everyone was too busy grooving to Jimi Hendrix, swaying to Janis Joplin, and probably trying to figure out where the bathrooms were. It was a wild time, man. A real testament to the power of music and the spirit of the 60s. It was like the ultimate hangout session, except with like 500,000 of your closest friends. Now let's talk about the lineup we wish we could time travel for. Hold on to your bell-bottoms, folks. We're about to dive into the world of technology, 1960s style. Back then, computers were about the size of a small car, and get this, they used punch cards. Punch cards, people. I bet you youngsters don't even know what those are. But believe it or not, this was the era that birthed the internet. Yeah, that little thing you're probably watching this video on right now. Of course, back then it was called ARPANET, and it was mainly used by government agencies and super smart scientists. It wasn't exactly scrolling through memes and posting cat videos. It was more like, hey, can you send me that super secret document? But really slowly, because this thing takes forever. All right, dudes and dudettes, let's talk about the grooviest movement of the 60s, the hippies. These cats were all about peace, love, and challenging the establishment. They were like the original influencers, but instead of promoting makeup brands, they were promoting, well, peace and love. They believed in a world without war, a world where everyone was equal, and a world where you could wear tie-dye without looking like a walking rainbow. And you know what? They weren't afraid to let their freak flag fly. They grew their hair long, wore flowers in their hair, and protested against, well, pretty much everything. They were like the human embodiment of a lava lamp, colourful, groovy, and always moving. Now, the hippies weren't just about peace signs and tie-dye, although they did rock those looks. They were also all about music, man. And no, I'm not talking about your grandpa's polka music. I'm talking about psychedelic rock, folk music, and anything that made you want to dance barefoot in a field. They flocked to music festivals like Woodstock, where they could let loose, listen to their favourite bands, and probably enjoy some herbal refreshments. It was a time of free love, free spirits, and, well, free everything, really. But hey, it wasn't all about peace and music. These cats were also about social change. They fought for civil rights, protested against the Vietnam War, and stood up for what they believed in. They were like the superheroes of the 60s, except instead of capes, they wore tie-dye, and instead of superpowers, they had, well, peace and love. All right. Fashion in the 60s, man. We're talking about a time when people were really expressing themselves, you know? Peace and love were in the air, and so were bell-bottoms. Like, seriously, those pants were wider than a disco ball. I bet you could fit a whole band in one leg. And don't even get me started on the tie-dye. It was like everyone was just throwing paint at shirts and calling it art. But hey, you know what? It worked. They were groovy, man, groovy. And let's not forget about the headbands. Everyone was wearing headbands, from rock stars to your grandma. It was a wild time for fashion, that's for sure. But hey, at least people were having fun with it. It wasn't all about designer labels and stuff like that. It was about peace, love, and wearing clothes that made you feel good. And you know what? I kind of dig that. But the 60s weren't just about bell-bottoms and tie-dye. Oh no, my friends. This was also the era of the miniskirt. These skirts were so short they barely qualified as clothing. I mean, I'm all for showing a little leg, but this was a whole new level. And speaking of legs, let's not forget about the go-go boots. These white, shiny boots were all the rage, and they made everyone's legs look miles long. I bet they were a pain to dance in, though. I can just imagine people tripping over themselves all night long. And then there was Twiggy, the iconic model of the decade. With her big eyes, long lashes and pixie cut, she was like a real-life doll. She rocked the androgynous look way before it was cool. So yeah, the 60s were a wild time for fashion. From bell-bottoms to miniskirts, people weren't afraid to experiment and push the boundaries. And you know what? I think we could all learn a thing or two from that today. The 60s were a time of incredible change and progress in the fight for equality. Brave individuals risked everything to make their voices heard. Martin Luther King Jr.'s nonviolent message continues to inspire us today. His "I Have a Dream" speech was a defining moment in American history. Rosa Parks' defiance sparked the Montgomery bus boycott. The civil rights movement was about speeches, boycotts, and peaceful protests. The Selma to Montgomery marches led to the Voting Rights Act. The courage of civil rights activists changed American history. Their legacy inspires us to fight for a better tomorrow. All right, let's take a break from all the serious stuff for a minute and talk about something a little more light-hearted. TV shows from the 60s. I mean, come on, who didn't love watching the Flintstones? It was like The Honeymooners, but with dinosaurs. And speaking of classic sitcoms, you can't forget about the Andy Griffith Show. Andy, Barney, Opie, Aunt Bee. They were like the family you always wished you had. Except for maybe Barney. He could be a bit much sometimes, am I right? But the 60s weren't all about wholesome family fun. Oh no, my friends, this was also the decade that brought us Batman, Adam West as the Caped Crusader, Burt Ward as Robin, pure genius, and those fight scenes, biff. Pow W, they were the best. And let's not forget about the quirky and supernatural side of 60s television. We're talking about shows like Bewitched, where a witch named Samantha twitched her nose and made magic happen. Talk about a dream wife. She could clean the house in a snap. And then there was The Twilight Zone, which gave us all nightmares with its mind-bending stories and surprise endings. Seriously, that show was messed up, but hey, at least it made you think, right? But perhaps the most groundbreaking show of the decade was Star Trek. With its diverse cast, futuristic technology and thought-provoking storylines, Star Trek boldly went where no TV show had gone before. Plus, it gave us Spock, and let's be honest, Spock was the coolest. Live long and prosper, my friend. So there you have it. From the Stone Age to the final frontier, the 60s had it all when it came to television. These shows weren't just entertainment, they were a reflection of the times, a way to escape from the craziness of the world and just relax for a little while. Hey, you know what's out of this world? Literally? The space race in the 60s? Imagine this. It's 1957, you're just chilling, enjoying your tang, when suddenly, bam! The Soviets launched Sputnik, the first artificial satellite, into orbit. I mean, talk about a buzzkill, right? It was like, hey America, we're up here, hanging out in space, come join the party. If you can catch up, can you imagine the looks on everyone's faces? The US was like, hold my astronaut ice cream. And the race was on. It was like the Olympics, but with rockets and satellites instead of, sports. From that moment on, it was a mad dash to see who could get to space first. I mean, who needs to go grocery shopping when you've got a space race to win, am I right? But the real highlight, the mic drop, the moonwalk of the century, was the Apollo 11 mission in 1969. Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, Michael Collins, these guys were the rock stars of space exploration. They were like the Beatles of space. I mean, picture this. Neil Armstrong steps off the lunar module and utters those iconic words, "That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind." Goosebumps, right? You could practically hear the collective gasp from Earth. Although you've got to wonder, what were they thinking back then? What should we name this giant rock we just landed on? I know, let's call it the Moon. Classic. The space race wasn't just about rockets and satellites, it was about pushing boundaries, dreaming big and proving that anything is possible. Except maybe parallel parking a spaceship. That's a whole other challenge. The 60s weren't just about peace signs and flower power. This decade was a technological roller coaster ride. From the birth of the computer to the invention of the cassette tape, the 60s were all about innovation. They say necessity is the mother of invention. And boy, were those mothers busy. We're talking game-changing inventions like the first commercially available computer mouse, the ARPANET, the precursor to the internet, and even the first commercially available LED. Can you imagine showing someone from the 60s a smartphone today? They'd probably think it was some kind of futuristic communication device from Star Trek. Beam me up, Scotty. I gotta update my Instagrok. And let's not forget about the cassette tape. Finally, music lovers could create their own mixtapes, no more waiting for the radio to play their favorite song. Although, I bet they spent hours trying to rewind that tape perfectly with a pencil. The 60s were a time of experimentation and innovation, and those advancements paved the way for the technology we know and love today. Just imagine, without the 60s, we might not have smartphones, the internet, or even the laugh track on this video. Okay, maybe that's a stretch, but you get the idea. So the next time you're scrolling through your phone, streaming your favorite music, or marveling at the power of modern technology, take a moment to thank the groovy geniuses of the 60s. They were definitely ahead of their time. And there you have it, folks! 10 mind-blowing facts about the grooviest decade ever. From the British invasion to the moon landing, the 60s were a time of incredible change, cultural revolution, and some seriously questionable fashion choices. But hey, that's what made the 60s so awesome. So if you dug this blast from the past, hit that like button harder than a hippie at Woodstock. And don't forget to subscribe for more totally rad content. Now it's your turn. Let me know in the comments below what your favorite fact about the 60s is. Or if you were lucky enough to experience it firsthand, tell us about it. Until next time, peace.